Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The next day, Nathan couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He couldn't explain it, but something about her stayed with him. As the hours passed, he found himself repeatedly replaying their conversation in his mind. Her bright eyes, her unfiltered honesty, and the way she spoke about her dreams. They were all so different from the usual business meetings he was used to. This wasn't just a simple contract anymore. There was something real happening, and it unsettled him. Nathan tried to push the thoughts away as he sat in his office later that afternoon. The city skyline stretched out before him, a constant reminder of everything he had built. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like enough. He picked up his phone and sent a message to his assistant, asking her to finalize the details for the contract marriage with Emily. He needed to get this over with. He needed to move on with his life. But when his phone buzzed again, it wasn't his assistant. It was a text from Emily. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. "Hi Nathan, I just wanted to confirm a few details. Can we meet again tomorrow to go over the contract? I think we should be clear about everything before we sign anything." Nathan smiled to himself. Emily was smart. She wasn't like the others who just went along with whatever he said. She was cautious, measured, and seemed to want to understand exactly what she was getting into. It made him respect her more, and strangely, it also made him nervous. The next day, Emily walked into the sleek, modern office building with a sense of purpose. She wasn't sure what exactly she was expecting, but it wasn't the cold, imposing structure she found herself standing in front of now. The lobby was pristine, the marble floors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She hesitated for a moment before walking up to the receptionist and giving her Nathan's name. The receptionist smiled politely and directed her to the elevator. As the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Emily stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the polished floors. Nathan's office was at the end of the hall, and as she approached, she noticed the large windows, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. When she knocked and entered, Nathan was sitting at his desk, reviewing some papers. His eyes flicked up, and for a moment, they locked with hers. "Emily, I'm glad you could make it," Nathan said, his tone warm, though his usual detachment was still there. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you," Emily replied, sitting down carefully, her nerves still visible. She had done her best to prepare herself for this moment, but now that she was here, everything seemed a little more daunting. Nathan studied her for a moment, noticing the uncertainty in her posture. "I understand this might feel a little strange," he said, breaking the silence. "But I assure you, this is just a formality. We sign the papers, and then we can both go back to our lives." Emily nodded, but her mind was racing. She had her doubts, of course, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't just about the money or the contract. It was about stability. And for her, a chance to get out of her own struggles. But what was Nathan really after? She couldn't help but wonder. The more she looked at him, the more she felt there was something beneath the surface, something he wasn't telling her. "Let's go over the terms, then," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She pulled the contract out of her bag, unfolding it on the desk between them. "I want to make sure we're clear on everything." Her fingers traced the words on the page as she began to read aloud. "Both parties agree to a 1-year marriage. The relationship will remain strictly professional with no emotional attachment or obligations beyond the contract. Both parties agree to maintain the appearance of a happy couple in public and at certain social events. The marriage will be legally binding, but it will not involve any personal responsibilities, such as cohabitation or intimacy." Nathan watched as she read, noting how focused she was. There was something endearing about how seriously she was taking this. Most people would have signed without thinking twice. But not Emily. She wanted to be sure. And that, in a strange way, made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: vulnerability. "Everything looks good," Emily said, her voice steady as she folded the paper. "I just want to be clear. There will be no surprises, right?" Her eyes met his, searching for any sign of dishonesty. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered her question. He had to be careful now, he knew. He didn't want to give away too much of himself. He couldn't afford to. But he also knew that Emily wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. No surprises, Nathan replied, his voice soft but firm. This is a business arrangement, Emily. Nothing more. You'll have everything you need, and I'll have what I need. We both stand to gain from this. Emily wasn't completely convinced, but she nodded. Okay, she said. I'll trust you on this. For now. The contract was signed, the deal was done. Nathan couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. But as Emily left his office, her figure disappearing into the elevator, he realized something. He wasn't as sure about his feelings as he had been earlier. This wasn't just about business anymore. Somehow, it had turned into something else, something neither of them could control. And as the doors of the elevator closed behind her, Nathan sat there for a long moment, staring at the contract on his desk, wondering if he had made a mistake, one he wasn't yet ready to face. The next few weeks passed in a blur of business meetings, gala events, and public appearances. Nathan and Emily's contract marriage, which had begun as a business arrangement, was now in full swing. They attended events together, smiled for photos, and exchanged polite words in front of others, just as the contract required. On the surface, everything was fine. But behind closed doors, something was shifting. One evening, Nathan stood by the large windows of his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. He'd just returned from another charity gala where he and Emily had shared polite conversation. There, fake smiles masking the growing tension between them. Despite the coldness of their arrangement, he couldn't deny that he found himself thinking about her more than he should. It wasn't just the contract anymore. It was her, the way she laughed, the way she seemed so genuine in a world full of pretenses. The truth was, Nathan had never expected Emily to affect him this way. She was different from everyone he'd ever known. Her authenticity was both refreshing and unsettling. He couldn't understand why he was starting to care, or why he couldn't seem to stop thinking about her. Meanwhile, Emily was beginning to notice the change too. Though the contract had clearly outlined their roles, strictly professional, there were moments when she felt a connection with Nathan that she hadn't expected. It was in the quiet moments between their public appearances, when they would share a meal or talk about trivial things like their favorite movies or childhood memories. She could see the weight of his loneliness behind his confident facade. And though she'd told herself it was just a business arrangement, she found herself caring about him in ways she hadn't planned. One evening, after a particularly tense event where Nathan had been unusually quiet, Emily found herself walking back to their shared car with him. The rain had started to fall lightly, and they stood under the awning of a building, waiting for the car to pull up. The sound of the rain tapping against the pavement was oddly soothing, and for the first time in weeks, there was a silence between them that felt comfortable, not forced. You've been distant lately, Emily said quietly, her voice hesitant. I can tell something's bothering you. You're not like the man I first met. Nathan looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He hadn't expected her to notice, let alone care. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. His usual response would have been to brush it off or shut down, but something about her made him want to be honest. It's just, this whole thing, he finally said, his voice low. This contract, the way we're living, it's not what I imagined. But I can't go back now. I can't undo what I've done. Emily nodded, her eyes softening. I understand. But maybe, it doesn't have to be this way forever. You don't have to be alone in this, Nathan. The words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't the kind of thing he would normally hear from someone in his world, where everything was calculated and transactional. It was raw, real, and for a moment, it made him feel something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But before he could respond, the car pulled up, interrupting the moment. Emily climbed in first, and Nathan followed, the distance between them now feeling heavier. The drive back to his penthouse was quiet, and as they arrived, Emily stepped out and paused, looking back at him. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Good night, Nathan, Emily said softly, turning to walk inside. Good night, Emily, Nathan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As she closed the door behind her, Nathan stood outside for a moment, staring at the city lights in the distance. He wasn't sure where this was going, or how he felt anymore. All he knew was that something had shifted between them, and he didn't know if he could go back to the way things were before. Over the next few days, Nathan found himself more distracted than ever. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily, about the way she had looked at him, the way she had spoken to him with such kindness. It was all starting to blur together in his mind. His assistant noticed the shift in his mood and quietly asked if everything was okay, but Nathan just waved her off. He didn't have the answers, and he certainly didn't know how to explain it. Emily, on the other hand, kept her thoughts to herself. She hadn't expected the marriage to change her the way it had. She told herself it was just a business transaction, that she would go through with it and walk away once the year was over. But as time went on, she found herself caring more and more about Nathan, and it scared her. She wasn't supposed to care. This wasn't supposed to be real. One afternoon, Emily found herself sitting at a small cafe, sketching in her notebook, when she received a text from Nathan. It was simple, just a request to meet for dinner later that evening. But the words made her heart race. Why did he want to see her? Was it just for another business meeting, or was something else happening? As the day turned into night, Emily prepared herself for whatever this meeting would be. She knew she couldn't keep pretending that this wasn't affecting her, but she also wasn't sure if Nathan felt the same way. All she knew was that she couldn't ignore the growing feelings inside her. When they met that night, Nathan's expression was unreadable. He wasn't sure how to begin. But as they sat down, the conversation turned from business to something deeper, something neither of them had expected. And as they talked, the walls between them started to crumble, piece by piece. Nathan, Emily began softly, her voice trembling slightly. What if we're making a mistake? What if this whole thing isn't just about the money or the contract? What if, she paused, trying to find the words. What if we're missing something? Something real? Nathan didn't have an answer, but in that moment, he realized something. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was a chance for something he had never allowed himself to want. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready to let it go. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Nathan and Emily continued their public appearances, their marriage still framed by the cold business arrangement they had agreed to. But behind the facade, things were changing. Nathan found himself thinking about Emily all the time. Her laugh, her honesty, her warmth, everything about her felt like a contrast to the polished, controlled world he had built around himself. It wasn't just her presence that affected him, it was the way she made him feel. With Emily, he didn't have to be the powerful, successful CEO. He could just be Nathan. He could be vulnerable, something he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. But he was still unsure of what that meant. Was it just a fleeting attraction, or was it something more? Emily, too, was wrestling with her feelings. She had come into this marriage with clear boundaries, telling herself that it was just business. But the more time she spent with Nathan, the more she realized that this wasn't just some temporary arrangement. She had never expected to feel anything more than a contractual obligation, but Nathan made her feel something real, something she had been trying to bury for a long time. It was late one evening when things finally came to a head. After another gala, Nathan and Emily found themselves walking back to their shared car, the cold air sharp against their skin. The weight of unspoken words hung between them as they crossed the parking lot. The usual routine of polite distance was no longer enough. There was too much silence now, too many unacknowledged feelings. Nathan, Emily said softly, her voice barely audible against the hum of the city around them. We can't keep doing this, pretending it's just business. You're not the only one who's feeling this. Nathan stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. He hadn't expected her to say that, but now that she had, the truth hit him hard. He turned to face her, searching her eyes for some sign of where this was going. I know, he said quietly. I don't want to just pretend anymore. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. Emily's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. She had always seen him as strong, the man in control of his world. But now, standing before her, he was just another person struggling to make sense of his emotions. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, the touch small but comforting. Maybe we don't have to fix it, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe we just have to let it be. Let it be real. Nathan looked at her, his breath catching in his throat. The words she said were simple, but they carried so much weight. It was the kind of honesty he had been afraid of for so long. He didn't know if he was ready to embrace it, but he also knew he couldn't walk away from it either. For a long moment, They stood there, the tension between them palpable, yet something shifted. It wasn't just about the contract anymore. It wasn't about appearances or business deals. It was about them. It was about a real connection that neither of them had expected to find. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Nathan said softly, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But I can't keep pretending like it doesn't matter." "You matter, Emily." Emily smiled gently, her eyes softening. "Maybe we don't have to know everything right now. Maybe we just have to see where this goes." The car pulled up in front of them, but neither of them moved. The driver waited patiently, but it felt like the world had stopped for a moment. In that brief silence, everything they had been holding back came to the surface. The walls that had kept them apart began to crumble. They climbed into the car together, neither saying another word, but the unspoken understanding between them was enough. There was no going back now. They had crossed a line, and it wasn't just about the business arrangement anymore. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet, but it felt different now. It wasn't the usual tension that filled the air, it was something new. Something raw, honest, and uncertain, but filled with the possibility of something real. Nathan looked over at Emily as she stared out the window, her face illuminated by the streetlights. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. When they arrived at the penthouse, Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car. She turned to Nathan, her heart racing. "I'll see you tomorrow," she asked, her voice soft but filled with a quiet hope. Nathan nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Tomorrow," he replied, his voice more certain than he had felt in weeks. He watched as she walked toward the building, feeling something shift deep inside of him. He didn't know where this would go or how it would end, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. As the door closed behind Emily, Nathan stood there for a moment, staring at the city skyline. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it also felt full of possibilities. He was ready to see where this would lead, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The next few days felt like a blur to Nathan. He had been running on autopilot, attending meetings, signing contracts, and pretending everything was normal. But in the quiet moments, when his thoughts drifted away from the demands of his company, Emily's words echoed in his mind. "Maybe we just have to let it be real." It was the one thing that had stuck with him. He had been so focused on keeping his life controlled and predictable, but with Emily, everything felt different. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to control everything. One evening, as Nathan sat at his desk, the weight of the city lights pouring through his window, he found himself distracted. His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from Emily. "Are you free for dinner tonight? I want to talk about us." The words hit him harder than he expected. It had only been a few days since they'd had their conversation under the rain, but somehow, everything felt like it was changing again. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. It was becoming something more real, something neither of them had planned for. He quickly typed back, "I'll pick you up at 7. The uncertainty he felt was quickly masked by the rush of adrenaline that came with the anticipation of seeing her again. He wasn't sure what this meeting would bring, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. When Nathan arrived at the restaurant, he saw Emily waiting by the entrance. She looked as beautiful as ever, but there was something different in her eyes, something that mirrored the uncertainty he felt inside. She smiled when she saw him, but it was a small, cautious smile, as if she, too, was unsure of where this was heading. "Hi, Nathan," she said softly, stepping forward. "I'm glad you could make it." "Of course," Nathan replied, his voice steady, but inside, his heart was racing. They walked into the restaurant together, the tension between them palpable, but neither of them spoke about it. They were still playing the game of pretending, but the stakes felt higher now. They sat at a quiet table in the corner, away from the bustling crowd. As the waiter took their drink orders, Emily took a deep breath and looked at Nathan, her eyes soft but filled with something else, something he hadn't seen in her before. It wasn't just the curiosity or the hesitation. It was something that resembled hope, and it caught him off guard. "I've been thinking," Emily started, her voice low, "about everything. About this arrangement, about you and me. And I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, but I can't deny that something is happening between us. I just need to know if you feel it too." Nathan felt the knot in his stomach tighten. He had been expecting this conversation, but hearing it aloud made it feel real. He leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze. He could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the same vulnerability he had been trying to ignore in himself. "I do feel it," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been fighting it, but I can't pretend anymore. This contract, this marriage, it started as something businesslike, but now I'm not so sure." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I can't say I know where this is going, but I know I don't want to keep pretending that I don't care. I care about you, Emily, more than I ever thought I would." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she processed what he had just said. It wasn't the response she had expected, but it was the one she had hoped for. She had been scared to admit her feelings, scared to let herself believe that this wasn't just a fleeting attraction, but something more. "I care about you too, Nathan," Emily said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "And I've been trying to convince myself that this was just about the contract, just about keeping everything in control. But I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore." She looked down at her hands, trying to steady her emotions. "I don't know what this means for us, but I don't want to lose this connection. I don't want to lose you." The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the weight of unspoken truths, of emotions they had both been holding back for too long. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand in his. The warmth of his touch grounded her, and for a moment, she felt like they were the only two people in the room. "I don't know what this will look like," Nathan said quietly, his voice soft. "But I want to figure it out. Together." Emily nodded, a small smile breaking through the tension. "Together," she echoed. And in that moment, she knew that whatever happened next, they were no longer just two strangers tied together by a contract. They were something more, something real. The waiter arrived with their meals, but the conversation had already shifted. The small, tentative steps they had taken toward each other now felt more like a leap. They both knew that the future was uncertain, that this could all fall apart in the blink of an eye. But for the first time in a long time, they were willing to face it together. The dinner was just the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but something neither of them could walk away from. As they left the restaurant, Nathan and Emily walked side by side, their hands brushing against each other occasionally. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't just accidental touch, it was intentional, and it was the start of a new chapter. As the weeks passed, Nathan and Emily's relationship continued to evolve. They had crossed a line from a business arrangement into something deeper, something they hadn't expected. Their time together felt natural now, the awkwardness from the beginning slowly melting away. But as much as they tried to embrace the connection growing between them, there was still an underlying tension, an unspoken question about what would happen once their contract was up. Nathan spent more time with Emily than he ever expected. Their dinners together, their quiet moments in the city, and even the way she looked at him in passing, everything made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. It was easy to pretend at first that this was just a formality, but now, the walls he had so carefully built around his heart were starting to crumble. He couldn't deny that he was falling for her. The idea of her not being in his life anymore was something he couldn't bear to think about. One evening, after another successful event where they'd played their parts as the happy couple, Nathan found himself back in his penthouse, pacing. He couldn't stop thinking about their conversations, the touch of her hand, the warmth in her smile. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew that when the year was up, he would have to let her go. The contract would be over. The illusion would be shattered. And what would he be left with? Nothing but the memory of something he never knew he needed. Emily, on the other hand, was beginning to feel the same pull. She had tried to keep her emotions in check, reminding herself that this had all started as a business deal. But it was no longer just about that. It was about Nathan. His presence in her life had changed her in ways she couldn't explain. The more she learned about him, the more she realized how much he had built, not just in terms of his company, but in the walls he had constructed around himself. She wanted to break through them, but she didn't know if she could. She didn't know if he would let her. It was a Saturday afternoon when Nathan asked her to meet him at the gallery she had always dreamed of opening. He had been listening to her talk about her aspirations, her love for art, and her desire to one day own a space where she could showcase her work. Nathan had always admired her passion, but today, he was going to show her something different. Something that was his way of opening up to her, of letting her know that he cared in a way that went beyond the contract. Emily walked into the gallery, her heart pounding. She had no idea what to expect, but when she saw Nathan standing in the middle of the space, a soft smile on his face, she felt a warmth spread through her. It wasn't just the gallery, it was him. The man who had once been so closed off was standing before her, vulnerable in a way that she hadn't seen before. "I wanted to show you something," Nathan said as he walked toward her, gesturing to the empty walls that lined the space. "I've been thinking about your dreams, about your art, and I wanted to help you make them come true. This place, this gallery, it's yours. If you want it. It's not part of the contract. It's just me, trying to do something real for you." His voice was sincere, but Emily could hear the hesitation in it. He wasn't just offering her a space to showcase her art. He was offering her a piece of his heart. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. She wasn't expecting this, not in a million years. She had dreamed of owning a gallery, but never in her wildest dreams had she thought it would come from Nathan. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered into his ear. "You don't know how much this means to me." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "But Nathan, are you sure? This is a lot. I don't want you to feel like you have to do this. You don't owe me anything." Nathan smiled softly, his hands resting on her shoulders. "I'm sure," he said, his voice steady. "You deserve this. You've shown me that there's more to life than just business. You've opened my eyes to what really matters. This is my way of giving something back. Something real." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Emily, I want to help you in every way that I can. I don't want this to be just a business deal anymore. I don't want you to leave when the year is up. I want to be with you. For real. Not because of the contract, but because I care about you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. She wasn't ready to let go of the connection they had built, but she needed to hear him say it. Needed to know that he was as invested as she was. "I care about you too, Nathan," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I've ever let myself admit. And I don't want to lose this either." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. "So what do we do now?" Nathan smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "Now, we take it one step at a time," he said, his voice full of certainty. "No more contracts, no more pretending. Just us. And we see where it leads." As they stood in the gallery, the future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it also felt full of promise. The walls around both of them were crumbling, and they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As the days went by, Nathan and Emily continued to explore their newfound connection. The boundaries that once defined their relationship as just a business arrangement had slowly disappeared. The time they spent together felt real now, and as much as they tried to avoid addressing it, both of them knew deep down that they had crossed a line, one that could no longer be erased. Their bond had become something neither of them had expected, but something neither of them was willing to give up. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of Nathan's penthouse, they shared a dinner together. It wasn't a formal event or business dinner. It was just the two of them, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Nathan found himself watching Emily more than he intended. She had always been so full of life, but now, in the intimacy of their time together, he noticed the little things. The way she smiled, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about her dreams. He realized he wanted to be part of those dreams, no matter how complicated it all seemed. Emily, too, had begun to see Nathan in a new light. She had known him as the powerful CEO, the man who could do anything he set his mind to. But now, she was seeing the side of him that was vulnerable. The side that wasn't about control or power. It was a side of him that made her feel like they were equals, that they could face whatever came next, together. Despite their growing feelings for each other, there was still a lingering fear between them. The fear that this might all fall apart when the contract ended. Nathan had promised her he wanted to take things one step at a time, but Emily wasn't sure if that would be enough. Could they really build something lasting after all they had been through? Or would the truth of their contract always loom over them, threatening to tear them apart? As if reading her thoughts, Nathan broke the silence. "Emily, I know we've been taking things slowly, but I need to tell you something. I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to wait until the year is up. I want us to be real, not just a contract." His voice was steady, but the emotion behind it was undeniable. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for him to say this, but hearing it aloud still made her breathless. She looked at him, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "Nathan, I've been scared too. Scared that when the contract ends, it will all fall apart. But what if? What if we just take a leap? What if we stop waiting for everything to be perfect and just trust in what we have?" Nathan reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "I've spent too much of my life controlling everything, keeping myself at a distance. I'm not doing that anymore. I want to take that leap with you, Emily. I want to see where this goes, and I want to do it without holding back." Emily smiled softly, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never imagined she would find someone like Nathan, someone who could be so open, so real with her. She squeezed his hand, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "Then let's do it, Nathan. Let's stop pretending and start living together." The air between them shifted in that moment, the weight of their past fears and uncertainties fading away. They no longer needed to wait for the contract to end to decide what their future could look like. They were ready to create something new, something that was truly theirs. As the evening went on, they talked and laughed, their connection growing stronger with every passing minute. There were no more walls, no more hesitation. Just the two of them, ready to face whatever the future held. And for the first time in a long time, Nathan felt at peace with the decision he had made. He wasn't just living in the moment anymore. He was building something lasting, something real. The night ended quietly, but neither of them needed words to understand the shift that had taken place. Emily stayed the night, and as they lay next to each other, Nathan realized that this was no longer a contract, no longer a business arrangement. It was a partnership, a relationship built on trust, honesty, and a deep, undeniable connection. The contract had ended, but something far more important had just begun. The days following that night were filled with an unspoken certainty. Nathan and Emily had crossed a line, and they were no longer bound by a contract. It wasn't just about the business arrangement anymore. It was about the two of them and the connection they had built. They were now living in a space where their relationship was real, where emotions weren't masked by formalities or expectations. They spent their days together, talking, laughing, and slowly discovering what it meant to truly be a couple. Nathan was different now. He wasn't the cold, distant self he once was. He had opened himself up to Emily in a way he never had with anyone. And Emily, she had come to realize that the feelings she had for Nathan weren't just a result of their contract or shared space. They were real. Her heart ached for him, for the man he was, not the businessman the world saw. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Nathan took Emily's hand, his touch more certain than it had ever been. He looked into her eyes, his voice steady as he spoke. "Emily, I know we've only been doing this for a short time, but I can't imagine my life without you. Everything about you has become a part of me." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had been holding back, unsure of how much of her heart she could give, afraid of getting hurt. But the sincerity in Nathan's voice made her want to believe. She knew, deep down, that he wasn't just saying this to make her feel better. He was saying it because it was true. "Nathan," she began softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've never felt this way before. And I've been scared of how fast everything is happening, scared that it might fall apart, just like everything else. But I'm willing to take that chance. With you." Nathan's face softened, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're everything I never knew I needed, Emily. I've spent my whole life chasing success, but I've only realized now that what matters most is this. Us. And I don't want to lose it. I want to spend my life with you. I want to build a future with you, not just a business." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of happiness. She had spent so long hiding behind walls, convincing herself that love wasn't for someone like her. But Nathan had shown her that it was possible to love, to be loved, in a way that was true and unwavering. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. "Nathan, I've never believed in forever, but with you, I think I can. I want this. I want us. For real. Not just for the contract, but because I love you." Nathan's heart swelled with emotion. As he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that spoke volumes. It was a kiss that sealed everything they had been holding back, a kiss that told the world they were ready for whatever came next. The past no longer mattered. All that mattered was the future they were going to build together. As they pulled away, breathless, Nathan smiled at her, his voice low and full of affection. "I love you, Emily. And I always will." Emily smiled back, her heart full. "I love you too, Nathan. More than I ever thought possible." For the first time, they were no longer bound by a contract, a business deal, or even fear. They were free. And in that freedom, they found the love they had both been searching for. Together, in the quiet moments that followed, they knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they would face them side by side. This was their new beginning, one that was full of hope, full of promise, and full of love. Months passed, and Nathan and Emily's relationship blossomed into something deeper than either of them could have imagined. The bond that had started out as a contract was now a partnership built on trust, love, and a shared vision for the future. They had weathered the storms of their pasts, and now they were standing on solid ground, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the world had in store for them. One afternoon, as they sat in the quiet of the gallery Emily had always dreamed of, Nathan turned to her, his eyes full of admiration and love. The space around them had transformed into something more than just a place to display art. It had become a symbol of everything they had built together. It wasn't just a business venture anymore. It was a reflection of their journey, their commitment to each other. "I never thought I'd end up here, Emily," Nathan said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "When we first met, I was so focused on keeping everything controlled, keeping myself closed off from the world. But you've made me realize that life is more than just power and success. It's about love, it's about connection, and it's about taking chances on the people who matter." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion as she listened to him. She had come so far from a simple waitress with big dreams to the owner of a gallery, with a love she never thought was possible. But it was Nathan who had shown her that dreams could come true, and that sometimes the most unexpected journeys were the ones worth taking. "I feel the same way," Emily replied, her voice full of warmth. "When I first agreed to this arrangement, I never expected any of this. I thought it was just a way to get by, to escape the life I had. But then I met you, and everything changed. You taught me that I deserve more. You've shown me that love isn't just something we talk about. It's something we live, something we build together." Nathan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but loving you is the one thing I'm sure I've gotten right." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Emily, I don't want to waste another minute of my life without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Emily's heart raced, her breath catching in her throat as she processed the words. She had never imagined this moment would come, but now that it was here, everything felt perfect. The man who had once been her husband for convenience now wanted to make her his partner for life. She felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at him. "Yes, Nathan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." With that, Nathan leaned in and kissed her softly, a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. It wasn't just a kiss to mark the end of their journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter they would write together, side by side. As they pulled away, the world around them seemed to fade. In that moment, there was only the two of them, ready to face the future with love, commitment, and the knowledge that they had built something real, something lasting. Their story, once just a business arrangement, had turned into a love story for the ages. And so, they began the next chapter of their lives, hand in hand, with no more contracts, no more doubts, only a future full of love, dreams, and the endless possibilities that awaited them.